My name's Father Peter Nugent, and I'm going to attempt to answer the questions of why do we suffer and how do we recover from those experiences that involve trauma. And I think it's important for us to understand where suffering is concerned, that religion is important for us in making some sense in what we do and what we experience. Um, Part and parcel of religion is for humanity to make sense of their environment and have some sense of meaning in that environment. And so, for Orthodox Christians, for example, we suffer because of one or more of three different things. Um, we suffer because of the presence of evil in the world. We suffer because we live in a broken world. You can see from natural disasters such as mudslides and wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, those kinds of things that we have no control over. But also we suffer because of the way in which we're made, and with the fall of mankind, the desires that we were given in their natural and in their original state became distorted. And in Orthodoxy, it's important for the soul to be pure, and it's the impurity of the soul that is its disease. So if we can heal the disease, then the soul becomes more and more pure, and we suffer less because of our own brokenness. Now, that doesn't mean we don't suffer, because we still live in a broken world, and we still have the presence of evil that affects us as well, but we're able to cope with that in a little bit different perspective. So we suffer because, for example, we had certain desires given to us when we were originally made, created, and with the fall of Adam and Eve, instead of desiring to seek God, for example, we desire more earthly and tangible things, and we see that through gluttony and drunkenness and greed and lust and those kinds of things, where our appetites, if you will, are out of balance. And so we do ascetical things such as prayer and fasting and almsgiving to help cleanse our soul of those things. And by doing that, we experience some healing, and with that, the suffering that we experience is transfigured as well. For us to be able to be present or engage, experience trauma, it creates certainly a hardship on us, and the way in which we move past that is through that prayer and fasting and almsgiving and focusing on others. And for example, with Hurricane Katrina, there were aspects of the New Orleans community where people pitched in and helped neighbors or others of a particular religious background. That it was just their tradition, that's what they do to assist one another. And in doing so, they were able to recover as a community on perhaps a smaller scale, not as what we would think of from the New Orleans area perspective, but perhaps whether it's the Hispanic community or the Vietnamese community or whatever. We were all able to help in one way or the other, and that takes us out of ourselves. And while it doesn't mean that we don't suffer and that something bad didn't happen to us, it does allow us to regain that sense of mastery. And with that, when we experience trauma, then we're able to move past it. But for us as individuals, we experience trauma, and in order to recover from it, there has to be a level of determination, and from social work perspective, we would say that it requires a measure of ego strength. And in doing that, or embracing that, then we are able to muster that inner energy, if you will. And we look to God to provide the grace necessary for us to get up, knowing that we've experienced all of this. And with the injustice that seems to come with those kinds of traumatic events, then we know that, yes, we are broken. We do live in a broken world. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad world. It means that we just simply live in a broken world and we're able to move past that. And that in this world, we do experience hardships. Fortunately, we also experience pleasures and joys and many truly wonderful things that are inspiring to us, that cause us to want to wake up the next morning and move on and love the others that are around us and engage in a happy life. But where the coping is involved, for us to be able to grow as individuals, we look at those experiences as growth opportunities, so that that experience, from our perspective, there is a transfiguration, not only of the experience, but of ourselves as well. And through that, we experience God's grace, and we know that His love is there for us, and that there is the frustration that comes with that, certainly, but there is forgiveness as well. And we can assist one another. Oftentimes, it requires a measure of patience on our part. And in the history of the Orthodox Church, for example, the Church has chosen to move very, very slowly in correcting certain bad teachings or poor teachings, heretical teachings. And I think that's a wonderful model for us. For us, on the one hand, to move slowly, because if we try to move too quickly through things, then we overlook some of the important stuff. And the Church, in that model, moved slowly to be able to see what was truly important and what was correct and true, and what was incorrect, needless. And when it came time to make the decision, then the decision was made. And the same thing for us. We look at those experiences, and are they difficult? Yes. There's no denying that. But that doesn't mean we can't move past it. And we look at what is what, knowing that we live in a broken world. And with the grace of God, okay, I know that this is not where we would want to be, but because of the brokenness of the world, we can move past this. This is not the end. And it allows us to rebuild our lives, for example, when we experience a natural disaster. But it also allows us to regain that sense of self and that sense of mastery over our environment. Because most of creation does not have that mastery, but we do. And from time to time, we are reminded that we don't have quite as much mastery as perhaps we think we do. And that is indicative of living really a faith-based life. When I sat down here in this pew, it was with the assumption, with faith, that I've sat down in this pew many, many times before and nothing happened. Well, I sat down in it again and nothing happened. But that was an act of faith on my part, based on, if you will, past histories. And the same thing for us. We experience those things, and we think that they are not going to happen. And once in a while, we do have something that happens, like for us here in the New Orleans area, we experience a hurricane from time to time, and we lose power, we experience damage to our homes, and there's the trauma that comes with that. But with God's grace, we're able to move past that. And it did. At the same time, if we're going to continue and live productive lives, we experience trauma, and sometimes it's truly debilitating. And with that, we turn to others. And the trauma that we may experience in a community setting, such as a hurricane or a wildfire of some sort, whatever it may be, it's hard on all of us. So we are equally vulnerable to those kinds of things, but our resiliency is different. And some of us are introverts, and we turn to those ways of recovery and coping and adjustment and moving beyond that are particular to someone who is an introvert. And the same thing for those of us who are extroverts. We may turn to others in the community and go out and help them, and that's our means of participating in the recovery. It's a much more active sort of recovery, and both of them, I think, are important for us. For some people, we can ask the question, why did this happen? And on the one hand, it's an important question to ask. On the other hand, perhaps that's not the question for us to ask. That instead, we acknowledge this did happen. And the question that we ask ourselves, perhaps more appropriately, is, so what am I going to do with this? How am I going to participate in the recovery? How am I going to move beyond this traumatic experience and become whole again? And so those kinds of questions give us the opportunity to be much more action-oriented rather than just, oh my gosh, now what do I do? Because that kind of question, I think, promotes paralysis and fear, whereas looking at things from a more action-oriented perspective, we're able to start moving forward as quickly as possible. And we turn to prayer, and we ask God for His grace, and we ask Him for His mercy, and to help us make the connections that we need to make, meeting people, getting contractors to come in, and that kind of thing. And that way, we move forward as quickly as possible. But again, all of that presupposes that we have the resources. And there are some of us who don't have those resources. For example, again, with Hurricane Katrina, we were all equal in terms of vulnerability, but we were not equal in terms of resiliency. And the elderly and the poor really suffered, I think, the most with Hurricane Katrina. They had the fewest resources. The elderly, oftentimes they're on a limited income, so they're not able to rebuild their homes like they would want, or perhaps as quickly as they would want. And the same thing with the poor. Well, the poor are the poor. They're not going to have the resources to rebuild their homes. And then that's where I think it becomes incumbent upon the rest of us who do have the means to assist the poor, to assist the elderly, because we all are a community in that regard. Where, for example, coping and adjustment and moving past traumatic events is concerned for personal trauma, such as experiencing theft or the burglary of our home, or a physical or sexual assault of some sort. I think it's important for us, again, to acknowledge that our sense of self has been violated and our boundaries have been breached. And we live life normally thinking that life has its boundaries and that we can continue on and there's no concerns. But we do have the presence of evil in the world, and we do have people who are ill in soul and body, and each of us is ill in soul and body. But some people take that illness and act out in a way that is undignified and inhuman, and we would consider not only criminal, but perhaps barbaric. Well, when that happens, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that trauma, first and foremost. Those kinds of things should never happen to us, but they do. So again, okay, it happened. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to move past this? And we may need some time to grieve this experience, and that's appropriate. I know, for example, a family of four, many years ago, the oldest daughter was in her upper teens. She died in a terrible traffic accident. And with the passage of time, the husband and father was able to move past the trauma. That doesn't mean he didn't miss his daughter. That doesn't mean that it didn't hurt. It just means his road to recovery was a little bit faster. The youngest daughter, she moved along through the grief process as well. But the mother of the girl that passed away, it took her a long time to recover from that trauma. And there would be times when she would be in the shower and turn the water on and just sit and cry. But that was part of her grieving process. And the husband and the youngest daughter would say, "Mom, you got to move past this. You got to let it go." Well, she will when she's ready to. But we have to give her that opportunity to grieve. And she will know when it's time, okay, now I need to move past this. It doesn't mean that I don't miss my daughter. It doesn't mean that I love her any less. It just means that my daughter would want me to move on, and I need to do this for the well-being of my marriage and the well-being of my daughter, surviving daughter. And those kinds of experiences, oftentimes we pray, we wait upon God, we talk with others, and with patience, again, going back to that example of the church being patient in making decisions, we too have to be patient in allowing ourselves the opportunity to grieve and to move past those experiences and to regain that sense of self, to regain that trust in society or in our environment, and to know that life is good, life is worth living. And there are lots and lots of joys that we can experience and many, many good things about ourselves that we can share with others and good things that others have to share with us. And with that, I think we have the means of moving past trauma as we experience it either on a community level or if it's personal as well. I would like to revisit one topic in particular, and that has to do with the topic of meaning in life. And what I have to say about that is not original. Someone else has already done so much more with that and is much more qualified, and that would be Viktor Frankl. He was Jewish, and he was interred in one of the prison camps during World War II, and he was a psychiatrist as well. And through all of those experiences, he saw many people that gave up on life, and when they gave up in that context of a prison camp, they died. But those that survived were those that were determined to live beyond the prison camp, and they found meaning in life and were able to redeem that experience, knowing that there was something beyond the prison camp. And where pain and suffering is concerned, there is the opportunity for us to go out and acknowledge that there is life beyond pain and suffering. There's life beyond guilt. And if there is something that has happened to us or that we have done ourselves that was rather ignoble, then there's the opportunity for us to go out and live, if you will, a redeemed life and to contribute to society and to humanity and make a difference in other people's lives. And Viktor Frankl's model of logotherapy is intended, I believe, to be a non-religious model. For many people, I think there is some complexity to it, and because of that, they give up on it. But it has a lot of really great qualities, and he encourages a person to look at what he calls the noological aspects of life. And I think he chooses that term noological instead of spiritual because of the religious connotations that the word spiritual has. So he chose the term noological so that it would be a more religiously neutral term. He also looks at life from a biological standpoint and from a psychological standpoint, and the integration of those things help us become a more well-balanced person. And where trauma is concerned, with him going through the prison camp, certainly there was trauma everywhere about that experience. He was able to make meaning out of the suffering. And if we can do that, then we're able to move beyond the experience. And what he posed as well, the question that he offered, was, what is the meaning of my life? And that life asks us that question. What is going to be the meaning of your life? What do you want written on your tombstone? How will you be remembered? And when life asks us that question, then we can respond with an answer. And I think that's a much healthier perspective for us than for us, whether we are religious persons or not. If we ask the question, what's going to be the meaning of our life, there's no answer. We're waiting for the answer, and the answer never comes. And that kind of question, when we pose that, can promote paralysis and fear, and there's ambiguity that, I don't know. I don't know what to do. Well, when we respond to the question, what will be the meaning of your life? And I think in a religious context, God asks us, what will be the meaning of your life? What do you want to be known for? How do you want to be remembered? What will you do to contribute to humanity? Well, those are questions, similar questions that we can answer those. And when we do, then we find meaning in life, much like Viktor Frankl posed the question, man's search for meaning. How will we find meaning in life? And his use of logotherapy, meaning-centered or meaning-based therapy, so that we're able to live a productive and happy life. And when bad things happen to us, it's okay. We can move past this.